You mentioned recruiting and the benefits that a big Spencer Rattler season could have in terms of, okay, NFL draft. Okay, this program is a different program. They actually can produce an NFL draft at quarterback. Let's look and broaden that out to recruiting as it stands with Shane Beamer. So we're in our second recruiting cycle with Shane Beamer. Will Muschamp, actually his classes weren't bad despite the free fall late in his career there at South Carolina, down to 2-8 the final season, recruited in the top 20 in the nation generally. But are you seeing differences between the approach of the Shane Beamer era versus Will Muschamp?
Well, I think the biggest difference, Mark, is the type of kids they're bringing in the sense of, what Beamer has preached since the beginning is that, he wants to be here. He wants to be a Gamecock, and he embraces the University of South Carolina. And it's really easy, by the way. I want to make this point. It's really easy to pick on the Will Muschamp era and pick apart every piece of it. So I'm not going to sit here and say that, while he was the head coach, he did not want to be the head coach at USC. He did embrace USC, and obviously it was a very ugly finish down the stretch. But bringing guys in that play for the name on the front of the jersey more so than the back, I think that was something that really irked people at the end of his tenure. You saw that as when he got fired and things sort of fell apart. But as I mentioned to you, Mark, the biggest difference for me, and I'll come out and just say it straight up, I'm not as diehard a recruiting guy as some, but as I mentioned to you, I am as invested in recruiting now as I've ever been. Because like you said, as far as the overall class rankings, that wasn't the problem. It was what was happening once they got on campus. Guys were not being developed. I mean, you go back and look. South Carolina had an offense with Deebo Samuel, Brian Edwards, Shi Smith, Hayden Hurst, Rico Dowdle, all those guys, what do they have in common? They're in the NFL, and they still couldn't produce. Talent wasn't the issue. It was the development, right? So now I feel like, I really fell out of recruiting, Mark, because, it gets really old every single recruiting cycle, seeing, this kid commits. And let me ask you this, Mark. We're not going to have a full-on, we could just go on forever about this, about a conversation about the recruiting services. And 24/7 Rivals, they do a great job. I'm not knocking them. Have you ever heard of a bad pickup in recruiting? Have you ever seen a recruiting service when a commitment happens go, okay, pickup, kid will probably never play? That never happens. Every player is a diamond in the rough. Every player is going to be an impact player. Every player is a great addition to your roster. Doesn't matter if he's a 2-star, a 3-star, a 4-star, 5-star, whatever, right? But in reality, right, when you look at what got so old, at least for me, in the Muschamp era, they picked up some really good players, some 3-star guys that were, I think, really good players that were slept on, some 4-star guys that were obviously good ball players, but we'd get all this hype and all this hoopla, and they get on campus, and you'd never hear from them again. Now I feel like, at least with Shane Beamer, what excites me more, I never questioned that Shane Beamer would be able to recruit here. Now, can he get to a top 10 level recruiting? That's a different conversation. But top 25 classes, we're talking about a guy, Mark, that assisted in recruiting the best players to ever wear the garnet and black at the University of South Carolina, helped to get South Carolina to Atlanta in 2010. The guy knows what good South Carolina football looks like, and he knows how to get the top talent to come here. That was never a question for me. It was about how are they going to develop the talent once it gets on campus. And with the staff he's put together, what they did in year one, I think you saw it, doing more with less, because as we talked, Mark, last week, that's what you have to do here, at least early on. You're not going to go get every 5-star. You're not going to go get every player that Georgia wants. You're not going to get every player that Clemson wants. You're going to have to take guys. Again, like I told you, it's the difference in identifying the 250th best player and the 600th best player. They're both 3-stars. They're very close in ranking, but which one fits your scheme? Which one fits your system? Which one can you develop and get the most out of? Look at Kentucky, Mark. Look at Kentucky. I mean, fans were irate with me 2 or 3 years ago when I said, and this is a direct quote, Mark Stoops is everything that Will Muschamp is not. And people freaked, like, what are you talking about? Mark Stoops does more with less. They don't recruit at a crazy level. They haven't out-recruited South Carolina over the past 8 years, but they've won 7 of 8. Why is that? They've got a culture. They got a system. They get guys that buy in and believe in it. They get guys that fit. They get the most out of them, and they play above their talent level. Under Will Muschamp, they barely played at their talent level. Most of the time, I believe they played below it. So it's more exciting for me to follow recruiting now because I feel like we're going to get, for the most part at least, we're going to get the most out of the guys we bring onto campus. I really do believe that. Again, I'm very confident over these first couple of years, South Carolina will sit between 15 and 25. I'm never going to be really concerned that the Gamecocks will drop outside the top 25 at any point. But as we talked before, no pun intended, it's the chicken or the egg conversation. Do you have to get all these elite 5-star talented players to win 9, 10, 11 games? Or do you need to have a breakthrough season, let's say this year, and go 8-4 or 9-3, and then you start attracting those 5-star players? I think it's a little bit of a mix of both. And with Shane Beamer's infectious energy and love for USC, I do think at some point he will be able to bring in those players. I don't know about ever getting to a top 5 level, top 10 level, but top 15, I think it's possible.
Because I don't need to remind you, but maybe the viewers are not seeing the next step in the Mark Stoops process is exactly what you outlined, is that he turned, Kentucky recruiting before he stepped on campus, and they had recruiting classes that you wouldn't think were feasible, could be possible in the SEC in the 60s and 70s in the nation. Then he brought that up to a top 40 level. But then when you develop those top 40 teams into top 40 classes, into top 25 teams, and win the 8 and 9 games you're talking about, now he's starting to attract really good recruits and the better players that are leaning them into 10 wins 2 out of the last 3 years. And you start to do both. You start to attract top level talent, plus you can develop them because you've already proven you can do that.
Mark, it's my favorite quote that I would associate with South Carolina and what our mentality should be, and I know it's a different sport, but the quote from Moneyball, where it's, we are card counters at the blackjack table. If we try to win like the Yankees in here, we will get beat by the Yankees out there. If we try to be Georgia in recruiting or Clemson in recruiting right now, it's not going to work for us. We're going to miss out on all those. We have got to be strategic in recruiting. DJ Swearinger was a 3-star. Melvin Ingram was a 3. I'm not saying we can't go get 4 and 5s, and I'm not saying they're not doing this. It would just be my mindset in recruiting. Like, every player we go get, there is a purpose behind it. There is a future. There is a plan. There is a projection that this guy can help our football team. And again, I'm certainly not telling Shane Beamer how to do his job. That's another reason. Like, I'm so glad I don't have to worry about recruiting. Shane Beamer's got to be the one that does all the official visits and the calls and the texts. You do that. That's what you're paid to do. I don't have to do that. But being strategic in recruiting, if you're going and getting into those conversations too. I think you're seeing it more. South Carolina's getting in these top 5s, these top 3s. You're seeing like Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, A&M, and then there's the South Carolina logo. That's a good start. Just even getting in the convos, getting in the mix, because recruits see other recruits. They see, oh, there's South Carolina. What they got going on down there in Columbia? They come down and visit all of a sudden. I mean, once you get a kid on campus, and I've had assistant coaches tell me this, Brad Lawing has told me this, once you get a kid on campus at USC, if you get him to a game and he experiences Willie B at its best, he experiences Sandstorm, I mean, you got as good a chance as any to get that guy, because Williams-Brice Stadium and that game day experience, and I'm sure there's many schools that would say this, but that game day experience, it stands out from many, many others, right? I mean, it's intoxicating. It is electric. You get a kid on, how are you not going to want to come play in front of those 80,000 screaming lunatics? So you get a kid on campus, you got a really good chance. You got to get to that point. So even just starting to get in the conversations with these big-time 5-star guys. And hey, here's the thing. Once you get one, Mark, it's a domino effect. Once you get one, positive momentum starts to build on itself, because you know what? Great players want to play with great players. Great players don't want to go win 5 games. They want to go compete for a championship. So, and that's why this year, what's important this year, whether you win 7, whether you win 8, if you can start making progress in regards to, hey, Georgia week 3, you don't even have to beat them, but make it a close competitive game. How about a touchdown game in the fourth quarter? Getting closer to A&M, getting closer to Clemson, because then you can start selling to kids, hey, we're just a piece or 2 away. We're just a piece or 2 away from really breaking this thing open. We're trending in the right direction. You're our guy.